Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WWE Breaking News. I'm your host, Mr. Brandon Hodge. So today is Thursday, and Thursday here on the Brandon Hodge YouTube channel is usually, news day, where I stand here and I talk about all the news stories from the past few days, and we kind of talk about that. But that's not what is happening today. Because I heard very early on, when I was in the beginning, early planning stages of today's news episode, that there's actually going to be a giant budget cut, firing, whatever you want to call it, today, where WWE is basically going to fire. They're going to release a bunch of wrestlers out of their contracts just in the sake of budget cuts. Because I don't know the reason. There's never a reason. They always cite budget cuts, or they'll cite pandemic, budget cuts or something, some kind of weird excuse. But basically, there's been a giant list of wrestlers released. A lot of them, and most of them, are from NXT and from developmental and stuff like that. And personally, I don't know them, so I'm not going to be talking about them inside this video. So right now on screen, we're going to put up every NXT person or trainee person or whatever that was released by the WWE. So that's the list right there. It's quite massive, it's quite stunning, and some of them were even getting called up to the main roster. I'm not talking about them because I don't know them too well, because I focus mainly on the main roster, the WWE main roster here on this channel, so I'm not going to try to read people's names. I don't know how to say their names and mispronounce them and anything like that. So those people have been released by the WWE. They're no longer employed by the WWE. Well, I guess no one's really employed by the WWE because they're all independent contractors, right? Even though they're stuck and they can't go work for anyone else, they have to work for that company exclusively, which is very weird the way that they're able to get away with that. In a way, WWE, they're able to get away with a lot. But I'm not standing here as a WWE fanboy. WWE system is definitely broken and does need to be updated and repaired. I mean, the independent contractor thing may have flew barely in the 1970s. It's definitely not up to par on what WWE, or not what the wrestling world should be today or whatever. But anyway, we're going to talk about the main roster people, or people we've seen in the main roster for a little while that we're actually familiar with, that have been fired, released by the WWE. So first up, we got Mr. Karrion Kross. So Karrion Kross was on the main roster for a little bit. I mean, I never really thought he connected. I never saw the guy in NXT, so my first impression of the guy was him coming to the main roster. It was just very lacking. I don't know, I won't necessarily blame it on him or whatever. I believe a lot of the downfalls of everyone released today, they fall a lot on WWE shoulders. I mean, sometimes it falls on the talent shoulders, but a lot of times it does fall on WWE shoulders just for creative and not having characters. Because these guys, they're handed scripts or whatever. They're expected to make it entertaining or whatever, and that's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. But basically, the guy never really connected with me as a viewer on the main roster. He's been released by the WWE. They just don't see a plan in the next few years for anything really crazy to do with the guy, so they went ahead and released him out of his contract. Now, Karrion Kross, he may still have an NXT contract, so he may just have a 30-day non-compete on his contract. The rest of the main roster people should have a 90-day non-compete. I don't know why they differ. They just, for developmental, they're it may not work out, so we're going to let you go wrestle for another company sooner than later because you're not making as much money as the main roster people. I'm pretty sure he's still an NXT contract, so he should be available for independent bookings and going to another wrestling company within 30 days. But the rest of the main roster people have to wait 90 days, but all the NXT people will be the 30-day thing. So moving on to the next name that kind of shocking was Ember Moon. Now, Ember Moon was on the main roster for a little while. Obviously, this is an NXT wrestler now, I guess we could call her, because she got on some injury or something, and then I was kind of waiting for her to return to the main roster, and it just never happened, and then she popped up in NXT, and it's oh. So that's what they're doing with her. They're not going to have her on the main roster, which is kind of, come on. I mean, it hasn't been too long since she was been on the main roster, I don't think. But anyway, Ember Moon, it's very, she's a very, very talented women's wrestler. There's it was hard for any other woman on the roster to really touch her on the things she could do. But the thing is, they just didn't see potential in her or whatever. I believe there for a while. I thought she was going to win Money in the Bank ladder match or whatever. I thought, Ember Moon was going to be the next, women's champion, but they kind of just dropped the ball on that and never went anywhere with that. So yeah, Ember Moon has been released out of her contract. She'll definitely do somewhere. But as for Ember Moon, she's kind of one of those talents. I don't know where she stands on a contract. I don't know if she has an NXT contract or if she's still on a main roster contract wrestling on NXT. I don't know. If she has an NXT contract, updated NXT contract, she'll be a 30-day. But I imagine with her being on the main roster and back and forth or whatever, she may have a 90-day. So we're going to move on to the next name, which is surprising to say the least. The next name released in this whole release is Miss Eva Marie. Eva Marie has been released out of her contract, which is very, very interesting considering Eva was just a name that they rehired recently. They fired her, years ago whatever the date was, 2017 or whatever. She was gone for a while. There was rumors of her coming back for months. I was talking about it here on the channel for months. Eva's coming back. Everyone's like, when? It finally happened. It was more of a manager role, but she did have some wrestling stuff that she did. But Eva is now released again. So it's just like, okay, we're going to give her a second chance. Maybe we do something with her now, bring her in, do a little something. Doesn't really work out the way they want. Like, let's get rid of her. So it's kind of stupid. And yeah, it's just a budget cut thing, I guess. I mean, don't take it personal, kid. It's a budget cut thing. Apparently, that's what John Laurinaitis said to everyone, only in the John Laurinaitis voice, of course. But yeah, that's the reason that John Laurinaitis. I mean, he's the guy who's gonna fire all these people because they fired Corona or whatever. But yeah, Eva Marie released. Now let's move on to the second from last name. We have Mr. Keith Lee. Now Keith Lee is someone who, you know, did quite well in NXT, and then they went back to the main roster and just couldn't really find the right footing. Was never really, you know, wrote for the correct way. Never really fit into the main roster the right way. I mean, in the ring, you know, Keith Lee looked pretty freaking good. He looked great. On the microphone, it seemed like he was kind of missing, you know, the character. What is this character? Who is this character? What is this character about? And it just seemed to be missing. It was just like, you know, a very hollow kind of gimmick and character. There wasn't really no, like, substance there. And it's just like, all right, dude, so who are you? And he gets the mic and, you know, the way he cuts promos and stuff like that, he has his own style, which I don't necessarily know if it fits the character correctly. So Keith Lee, it was just always a little off and never really felt the proper thing. I mean, I don't want to compare him to like Roman Reigns, like years ago when Roman was a babyface and couldn't really find the right footing to be like a cool wrestler or have, you know, great charisma or whatever like that. I mean, Keith Lee definitely does. It's just trying to find the right kind of thing for him was very tough, especially with people writing for him and everything. It was just kind of a mess. But hopefully Keith Lee can find proper footing somewhere else in another wrestling company. That was definitely a name that should definitely be in AEW. Keith Lee would be a great addition, and maybe he could find proper footing there and actually kind of reinvent everything. And plus, he has creative control, which may help a lot, and be a lot of the problem. But yeah, Keith Lee released for the WWE. Which brings me to the final name. Now, a lot of people are going to be mixed on this. Well, I don't want to say mixed on this. I don't know where to stand on this. So, let me just say, the final name that's been fired today, has been released for the WWE, is Nia Jax. Nia Jax has been fired. Now, people jokingly said, and maybe some people not so jokingly have said, fire Nia Jax. She's dangerous in the ring. She's injured multiple wrestlers or whatever. Now, accidents do happen. I mean, Seth Rollins has injured people too. I mean, a lot of people have injured people. I don't want to point fingers or anything like that, but like Nia Jax is someone who's been she could use some more training. She's new at this. Like, Nia Jax wasn't like this great like independent wrestler for years and decades and decades and decades. She was pretty much, for the most part, you know, trained completely by the WWE machine of how to wrestle, how to be safe, how not to hurt someone, how to look like you hurt someone without actually, you know, injuring them and take them out of action for months at a time. I feel like there's a little rush with her and everything, and then she was injuring people in the main roster. And I was like, okay, well, if she's injured, like, what, 3, 4, 5 people at this point, or 3 or 4 or 5 different times or whatever, I think that's the point where we should step back and be like, okay, Nia, we need to work with you a little bit in the ring, so we're going to take a break from the television. We're going to write you off TV for a little while. We're going to make you safer or whatever. We're gonna make you more badass than ever or whatever. But, you know, that time just never came. Week after week, Nia was just there. And fans were getting really mad about it. They'd be like, why is Nia still here? They need to do something about this. And here we are, like, years later, and their answer to this is just to fire her. So, I mean, a lot of people will be happy about this, which I don't know if that's necessarily the most appropriate response here. Like, Nia didn't mess up, and she had her attitude or whatever, but I don't know what was like in character and what she is as an actual person. I'm sure she's a fine, wonderful, nice person or whatever like that. But I don't want to stand here and be happy over someone losing their job, but finally something has been done about Nia. I mean, she could have just used some extra training or something like that. I don't think she got any of that behind the scenes, but Nia, yeah, she's been fired by the WWE, so that is the main roster little list. So just a summary here, main roster, pretty much we got Karrion Kross, we got Ember Moon, Eva Marie, Keith Lee, and Nia Jax. Now, not all of them were on the main roster, some of them were like back and forth or whatever, but that is pretty much the main roster. There were a few NXT people they were calling up, that were in the midst of calling up that they got released, as well as the giant list. There's a giant list compared to that little list. There's a giant NXT list of NXT wrestlers released, but ladies and gentlemen, that is very shocking, and that's going to do it for this breaking news episode. Just wanted to share that crazy news at this, what time is it? It's like freaking, by the time this goes up, it'll probably be like 8:30 or 9 o'clock Eastern time, so I apologize that this video is so late. I was going to do like an actual news episode today, But I just got, I was kind of waiting for this news to come out. I thought they were going to break it like 3 past, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Never came. Then like 7 o'clock, this news finally came out, and I was kind of just waiting on that. There wasn't a whole lot of news today anyway, so I thought I'd just do a breaking news episode because it's already so late. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video nonetheless. Right now, it's going to leave a link to 2 previous videos for you guys to check out, as well as a button to subscribe to this channel if you guys happen to be brand new here. But I am Brandon Hodge, and I will see you guys in the next video.